Hey everyone, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today I have Tarek Fayoumi on from Movies with Tarek, and well, this is something we wanted to talk about for a while and didn't have the chance in terms of our scheduling. We wanted to talk about movies that depict people who are on the spectrum
Yes,
of autism. Yeah, go ahead.
and I will say the spectrum, even in this day and age, like even in my times, the reason why doing this is because looking back at like our outline of movies, like it's amazing how many films apparently have like focuses on the spectrum. Yet again, I come to realize that many of us cinema fanatics don't realize it till later. But then like even today, like there's like even the spectrum itself in and of itself is honestly that changes and evolves over time, especially after COVID, whatnot. But movies on the spectrum, honestly, I believe, like still can represent like positive aspirations for those on the spectrum. And then there are some though that unfortunately do not depict it right at all.
Right, right, exactly. So when it comes to depicting movies about people on the spectrum, do they do a good job overall? Or is there a lot of misunderstanding? Like, what are some of the things people don't get, you think?
Some people don't understand that when someone is on the spectrum, that it doesn't mean that they are not talented or that they're always going to need assistance. It just means like they may have mental health issues that are unfortunately undefined, or they may have patterns that they struggle to break out of, or on top of that, kind of it's like they have a strength in a strong suit and they can really grow in that arena. Or some in the early days, like even it's not so much now, but still can happen now. You have it where it's like many parents or families, if they have someone in their life where it's like that's on the spectrum, sometimes we're in a pattern. It's like we assume for the worst, and then it's like they want to invest in all the resources. But the sad thing, and the resources, not saying they're helpful or unhelpful, but sometimes it's ultimately now in this day and age, if someone has someone in their family on the spectrum, they should honestly let their kid grow into it a little more, because sometimes their skill sets don't evolve till way later in time.
Mm.
Whereas when I was younger, I've had times where sometimes my family was over assuming I would struggle, but then they would be told like, oh, like by other staff at schools, like, oh, Tarek's too advanced for this kind of thing. Like there's a thing, like there's like people are on the spectrum. There's always a talent where they lie, but at the same time, everyone's traits of being on the spectrum has its strengths and weaknesses. Some they can work around it, and some truly cannot work around it. But it's one of those things where they just cannot help it.
Right, right. Well, when we talk about movies that depict the spectrum, we actually there was a lot of films you sent me.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think I ended up just sticking with two because I'm like, I don't know if I have enough time for
Oh,
that.
and I totally agree with you, especially when we realized later some of these films are like, wait a minute, this geared on a spectrum. Like, which spectrum portions did we think about? Then either it's like it was like to a point where it's like very hidden, or to a point where it's like, wait a minute, I kind of understand now. But the ones that we chose, I feel are faithful in the strong sense, but then one that's ungrateful in the negative sense, and we'll
Right.
get into that in a moment for sure. Definitely.
Well, I think the first one, or the one you kept bringing up, was the Academy Award winning Rain Man. And yeah, that's a film where I didn't know if it was accurate or not, because they have this whole thing where Raymond, played by Dustin Hoffman, who's now canceled, Raymond was he was like a genius at math and could figure out any problem. Now, is that accurate?
To an extent, it is accurate. Like there are some on the spectrum who have a very strong memory, and then there are some, that they can remember things off the top of their head. Like me, I can remember stuff movie related off the top of my head. I feel many on the spectrum have those where it's like their strengths is memorization, but some have like it's like a strength of memorization where it's like that they can handle than ones they can't. But in his sense, the only thing that I think is a little misdefined is how it's like every little thing that has a detail to it kind of thing. But that is where I find Rain Man very fascinating with the spectrum, because it's purely Raymond's mind of how he feels he has to adapt to get by in his everyday life.
Right. Yeah, because he's someone who doesn't really know how to blend in with society, yet he has the intelligence to do so, but the bureaucratic healthcare system seems to be holding him back. Especially when you get to, and I mean, this is kind of spoilers, but the movie's been out forever.
Oh, and yes, and the anniversary of it's this year. So if no one's seen Rain Man, if you haven't ever watched it, definitely watch it on the big screen when they have the anniversary run.
Oh, right. But you kept gravitating towards this film. What is it about Rain Man that you particularly liked about it?
What I particularly like about Rain Man, honestly, is like, you know, the sensitivities of Raymond. I like how, like, you know, I have boundaries, I have patterns I get so sensitive to if I feel like they're falling apart or not going according to plan. But mine, I don't like overreact like him in a way, but that just shows it's a trait. Like, people feel like when they're in a pattern or a schedule, where it's one of those things where they feel like their whole day is going to be misdefined, or many aspects of what they're consistent
I'll
with.
just keep holding the mic.
Or what many aspects of what they're consistent with is not going to go accordingly. Like, and that's Raymond's mind. Every day, things are set, even in the home he's in, even in like what shows he watches at different times, a lot of which causes his brother, which is why I love this movie, because it's like brotherhood with a sibling not even understanding what autism is.
Right.
But then even though he is resentful at first, it really grows to show how people, honestly, like if they have a sibling or someone in their family, it really grows to show how there's like that connection in which you learn to adapt and you accept them for it.
Right. Well, this has kind of been like a ubiquitous film throughout the years, because everyone's been kind of quoting Rain Man and, you know, doing I'm an excellent driver, or like, you know,
Qantas never crashed.
right, exactly. That was the one airline that didn't crash.
Oh yes, and then the thing that I just love about that film is, like, you know, like it's like and don't like that. That's the thing, you know. Some people have to learn to make sacrifices even in that scenario, because they get an understanding of what someone in their family can handle and not handle.
Right.
So, like knowing me, I know what I can handle being on the spectrum. I know what I cannot handle. I mean, like, I know I can handle flying and whatnot, but what I really can't handle, I come to realize growing up, I couldn't handle a team sport. I couldn't handle anything where it's like the stressors of working with a team like that kind of thing. That's why I never really played on sports teams, whatnot, because it just would be mentally overwhelming with that and academics so much, and where I would probably have a meltdown. But I mean, honestly, I just feel like Rain Man, there is a sense of a strong mindset of strong knowledge in many arenas around the area of numbers, but then there's weaknesses purely with Raymond over not being able to adjust. But then unfortunately his brother finds himself forcing him to do so, unfortunately.
Right. Well, yeah, to go over the plot a little bit for Rain Man in case nobody has seen it. It's a story about this guy who had a neglectful father. Charlie, played by Tom Cruise, is a father who basically wasn't that good to him, and he passed away. And when it came to inheriting the house and everything,
then he realizes, like, with that whole thing, like, when I go, the money goes to someone else that's undefined kind of thing. And then when he then he's able to have resources to go look at who inherits that money, then they go to this home called Walbrook. He's like, who would it go to at Walbrook? He doesn't know what Walbrook is till he gets there. But then all of a sudden, this one man comes rolling along, like, oh, my father was this, and Tom Cruise's character is like, what the hell? It's like, oh, Raymond's your brother. You're like, how come I never knew I had a brother? So basically then, in the beginning, it's about Tom Cruise's character wanting to inherit money from his father, but at the same time, he feels the only way to do that is to prove his brother can't handle it. But then it doesn't even become about the money anymore. It becomes truly about, like, how both of them are, like, having this connection they've never had in the many years that Raymond's existed.
I do wonder if they would have had that connection if Raymond hadn't the talent to guess numbers and be effective in Vegas and win him a ton of money.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite scene, honestly, of that whole film.
Oh, when they're playing the cards?
To an extent, yes, because that's, you know, when Tom Cruise thinks he just lost everything financially, like he's screwed completely, and he realizes when Raymond can remember every little thing, he buys that deck of cards, be like, name everything I don't have.
Yeah.
And then that's when that's when just that connecting moment of like, the brotherhood comes in, because it's like truly that just shows, even though Raymond may drive Charlie crazy, Raymond is still kind of like an asset in a positive way to his brother.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he learns to love him, but I wonder if, like, if he didn't have what he had, if he still would. Like, what if Raymond couldn't make him rich? Do you think he'd just drop him back off at the home then?
I honestly think that it almost would have went to that approach, but then how everything around Charlie alone was already falling apart, kind of thing. It was like he already was starting to have a lot more to lose. But then I think it's one of those things coming from someone who's lived a wealthy life to realizing, family comes first in the very end. But then, at the same time, though, he has to understand that if he wants to make Raymond a bigger part of his life, he's going to have to make like very unanticipated sacrifices.
Right. Well, in the end, he did love him, and he realized he was his brother. I mean, there was that one very effective scene, I thought, towards the end when he's talking to the people from, what was the name of the institution they were at?
Walbrook.
From the Walbrook Institution. They're sort of manipulating Raymond to prove that he can't live on his own when they said, do you want to live with your brother or do you want to stay here? And all he does is just keep repeating both options.
And I admit, like that's even a hard thing in today's world, because there is people who are in that pattern. And then at the same time, in reality, when they're so used to a pattern, it's sometimes like the outcome for Raymond, either to be with Charlie or the institution, it's like it all comes down to what is the ultimate place where Raymond is gonna, just like not fall apart, kind of thing, especially if going for many years not knowing his brother existed, and then Charlie not even knowing that Raymond existed.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the end, it kind of was a damnation against the healthcare system that doesn't really show a lot of care when it comes to people with mental disabilities.
Exactly. And the term in that film that I'm kind of still researching today is a term where it's like I kind of find it slightly offensive, but at the same time it's kind of crystal clear. The term autistic savant.
Idiot savant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Wow. I mean, they still use that term. I mean, so someone close to me told me I might be an idiot savant. I'm like, you just call me an idiot?
And that is just, and that's the thing, like many people sometimes don't understand, like just because someone is on the spectrum doesn't mean, that they're, that they may be absent-minded like many may assume. Or then the other thing is, then sometimes even someone who isn't technically on the spectrum may be just as absent-minded. So so a lot of times the mindsets of how many view things or how someone was raised gets misconstrued with that subject. Now I was part of an autism foundation. I'm still part of that autism foundation called Turning Point Autism Foundation. And honestly, after graduating from that like 5 years ago now, I've come to realize, even like almost relating to Raymond from Rain Man, I've come to realize, like everyone is is on the spectrum in their own way. Everyone has their own pattern, but ultimately, what is important is accepting who they are and what they're passionate about. Like how how I'm a critic, you're a critic, kind of thing. Like out of there, kind of, because I was on a hold before doing my critic stuff from when I was in Turning Point. But then Turning Point was what really inspired me to jump further, because like in those establishments, people on the spectrum can be need to be reminded they can have a voice, they can be committed to a craft, and they should not let others bring them down about what they love being passionate about, like how Raymond's passionate about numbers and Rain Man.
Yeah. Well, how do you think the depiction of Raymond's disability? Do you think that was good, or was it inaccurate at all? Or
I think it was very clear for its time frame, because
Okay.
this is still the 1980s. There was still where we had so many technologies have been evolved since then.
Yeah.
So it was kind of so for its time frame, it's like the depiction of Raymond was kind of calculated in that time frame, because this is still like when computers are growing, and mental health, it was still just down to like regular doctors and not very many individualized doctors, and psychology was around and even psychiatrists. But now even today, some people may assume having someone on the spectrum medicated is always going to help them. But that's actually inaccurate, especially when they realize the other like negative outcomes like medicines for mental health can truly have when they get too hooked on them. Kind of.
Right. Right. Well, the nice thing about Rain Man was it was about the brother who ended up learning more about his sibling and how he can be good to him and how he can help people cope with such disabilities. And he learned it on a much larger scale than what the professionals themselves are doing, who just kind of wanted to keep him as a prisoner, it seemed.
And I agree with that. And also, that's like the moment where like even Charlie realizes that Raymond may be the only person in his family that he'll truly have going forward. And at first he thought he had everything lost as soon as his father passes. But Rain Man is just a moving movie about brotherhood, about accepting someone for who they are, and realizing, it doesn't matter that someone like Raymond is different. And also, it just shows that deep down, even that Raymond is just very different from the world around him, kind of thing. And that's the one thing I think even that I've struggled to realize, and I'm sure a lot of us on the spectrum realize. Like, we'll have our moments if we're down or in a hard place where we think to ourselves, like why am I so different from everyone? Why am I not fitting in? But then in the end, it doesn't matter, because there are so many people, even not on the spectrum, who are going to find themselves in the same boat, honestly.
Yeah. Well, if you didn't get to know him, this is probably one of the better on the road movies I've seen.
Totally.
Yeah, where you get it's a lot like, what was that movie that won Best Picture that was real like kind of controversial? It was like with Viggo Mortensen, and I can't remember the actor.
Do you remember what year it was?
It was like 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Was that Green Book?
Yes, it was a lot like Green Book,
Yeah, and
done properly.
And I do agree. Like, I do enjoy Green Book for its story, but I see your connection, truly.
Yeah, because it's about two people. They go on the road. They discover things. One person annoys the other, and they kind of have to learn how to coexist and respect each other for who they are, as you said, rather than what they have. But yeah, I mean, structurally, the movie worked pretty good, too. It takes so long. It doesn't feel like you're dragging and waiting for stuff. But that's because Dustin Hoffman is just stealing the whole show.
Oh, yes, he is. Like, especially in every moment. And, like, I just love how immediately when his brother brings up a subject, being like, you want to go to a baseball game? We'll see this person pitch. Well, he can't go this day. He doesn't pitch till this day.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go this game on this day. Or like how we were talking about the airline sequence, when he's like, okay, we can fly a different airline. And every airline he names like the biggest crash of all time, saying like casualties. And then when you think, I just love that moment where Tom Cruise, like, all airlines have crashed at one another. That does not mean they're not safe. Because when you think about that in today's society, cars crash more than planes. But I understand. And also there's so much more to Raymond. Like, I'm sure he doesn't want to be in the air. I'm sure he just, he just can't handle it, honestly.
Well, when it comes to his routines and his patterns, how do you think they depicted that? Was that accurate? Because, like, it seemed like they knew what they were doing, but again, it's Hollywood. It's a movie. So, like, when it comes to, like, the card counting thing, I'm like, I think they had to just do that for the plot.
I think, honestly, I mean, maybe there are some who have that extent of memory he does.
Yeah.
But in this day and age of how much our technology has evolved, I kind of doubt that a little bit.
Right.
But even then, though, like, his patterns, no, I will tell you, actually, I think those patterns, like his overreactions when things scared him, I think that is very accurate. Because
when he's hitting himself and he doesn't want to go on the plane, like, ah!
Like I have seen that. I've heard, like, sometimes I'll hear, I mean, it's unfortunately unfortunate, but I'll hear sometimes people on the spectrum get all angry and say stuff like, I want a new brain, or I want, or I don't like this stuff. And then you get to a point where it's like, don't think that about yourself. Unfortunately, that's just going to make you fall in a mindset that's just going to have you spiral, and is it worth, but sometimes that's the thing, unfortunately. I feel many, sometimes they are too much in a pattern where it's like that's so introvert that they just don't feel comfortable breaking.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, the introvert pattern can be a struggle for them in their later future.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. He can't really thrive because he seems to get afraid in large settings with a lot of people. And as someone who is, I don't know if I'm actually diagnosed with autism yet. I'll find out my results in a few weeks, but it can be very overwhelming when you're in large crowds of people.
And it can be. And I will tell you, like me, even I mean, even though we're in a bar right now, but this bar is empty. Like if I was in, like, back when my sister was going to school at University of Iowa, there are times where it's like, oh, let's walk into a bar. That bar would just be so, like, cramped and whatnot. And then me, I'm just like, okay, I can't stand this.
Yeah.
Like I know I can handle big segments like a show or a movie, but anything where it's like so crowded like that, I cannot stand it because it's just too noisy and my mindset just gets totally overwhelmed. Or when I feel like I'm going to be late, or when someone is kind of making me late, then that's kind of like me at screenings. Like, you see how early I get there.
Yeah, you get there pretty early. You're usually the first guy there at the screening.
Oh, I try my best. I'm one of those people where it's like it has to be 15 minutes or earlier, depending, or if I'm late, at least 10 minutes or earlier. But sometimes those things are unavoidable. But like that's just the thing, though. It's like patterns where it's like, that like many on the spectrum are equipped. There are some, though, who may not even be on top of their game like that very much. But that's just because, usually it's because of how they want their priorities in another place, or they like to have one thing a higher priority than the other. A lot of times, like I know many on the spectrum who love art. I know many on the spectrum who love anime. I know many on the spectrum who love sports very much, like how Raymond did, kind of thing.
Yeah, he didn't like what he did is he loved the Abbott and Costello, but for Who's on First, which I think he repeats throughout the whole film.
Yes, and then even like one thing I just recall now is even when his brother does something that drives him crazy, then Raymond has a whole set of notebooks. He takes out a notebook called like this is my red notebook. This is when I write down I'm feeling red. And
right.
That reminded me, because when I was in Turning Point Autism Foundation, they had a thing where they would ask us, how are you feeling today? Green for good, yellow for mad, then red for not good. Then a lot of us would say green, yellow. But when one of us would say red, then they would get concerned. Very concerned a lot of times.
Well, yeah, because then they're concerned if they're a danger to themselves or someone else.
Yeah, and also a lot of times, sometimes, many on the spectrum, including myself, sometimes we think too deeply about how bad something may be, or we're oversensitive. And later on, it's like it truly is not the end of the world, maybe a frustration, but it's not the end of the world. So it's always the extra layer of sensitivity. But to this world, even being extra sensitive does have kind of a ton of benefits. 'Cause it's like many find themselves extra aware of things and they're around them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Struggling over my words here. That probably is my autism. Who knows? Raymond does have to go by like a very strict regimen or schedule, and breaking that, I think, because I've had that difficulty. Like when I was living in LA, the homesickness I felt was unbelievable. And it kind of made me realize, like, I'm kind of a homebody. I like to be where I am. That's why I'm in Chicago. But you want someone like Raymond not to just be defined by his disability. You want him to live a good life. And I think Tom Cruise's character, Charlie, tried to offer that to him. But he couldn't because all the healthcare experts wanted to keep Raymond at home. And I kind of like how it didn't just end on a Hollywood note where he gets to go home with Raymond and be there forever. He just has to, he can only visit him.
And I completely agree because, when you look at it, Raymond spent his whole life in that institution, but being acquainted to all his routines and grown into it. Whereas at the same time, Charlie violated a rule by taking him on a trip without consent.
Yeah. Now, was that illegal? Couldn't they?
Honestly,
because he didn't get discharged. He just took him.
I think I think a lot of things have state laws, but I know now, I mean, maybe the times are different, but in those situations, there's usually a lot of documentation for in that type of circumstance. But like usually it would be something like, oh, sign off. But if it's multiple days, it would, in this day and age, that would need advance notice.
Right.
But then there are some times where it's like absolutely not, depending what it is.
Yeah. Was there a particular moment or scene or detail in Raymond where you went, wow, that's me?
It went like that for, like, honestly, it truly went like that when honestly there's this moment in the film where basically, like, honestly being so adapted to his routine and his rules, like, and how Charlie can't stand that kind of thing, like, you know, like when they're staying in a hotel, he tells him, you know, lights out kind of thing, and then Raymond turns the light back on kind of thing, like not wanting your pattern broken, like let's say someone tells me, Tarek, how about you don't go to the screen day? Knowing me, you probably know how that would go.
Right.
I'd be like, I am not missing the screening, not now, not ever.
Right. Well, it's your passion, you know. That's what you do. I mean, thank God for the film critic thing, because it kind of keeps you occupied, and I know it certainly keeps me occupied doing this right now.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't know if it's part of my autism or not, but it's like I can't let shit go a lot of times.
And that's the thing why we love movies. It keeps us engaged. Like, even if I'm watching something I'm not reviewing, it keeps me engaged. Or when I have these books on movies, or when I get those Sight and Sound magazines, all those just keep me engaged. Like having the cinematic aspect of my life, gives my life meaning.
Yeah,
honestly.
same here. It's like you're seeing your friends every time it's screening. So
and then
it's safe. It makes you feel safe.
And then we're conversing. We're talking about other films. We're reminding each other what we plan to cover. Then also at the same time, it's like we get tons of more ideas out of it. And hell, we probably have tons of more ideas in the works, some of which can come true, than some of which may have to be on hold. But honestly, it's one of those things where us in the Chicago Indie Critics, which we're in, Chicago Indie Critics,
Ooh,
honestly. Yeah, I mean that's a positive. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like we all can converse, and even those on the spectrum can truly converse too. And Rain Man, going back to that, it's about ultimately connecting, accepting someone, and finding the positive qualities of that person, even though Raymond is on the spectrum.
Yeah, well, you do see the positive, because he's a sweet guy.
He very much so is.
And he he has an extraordinary gift, which I think a lot of people not everyone with autism has like an extraordinary gift, although I think in a way everyone's gifted in their own manner.
And a lot of times it's not seen till way later. Like I've said, I know people who are very good at art, then they tell me they're self-taught. Kind of, I'm like, wow, this is really good. Or they always have to have a notebook to do their sketches. Or I know people who know a ton of stuff about gaming, whatnot. Now, my one concern sometimes is the amount of screen time we're all getting, because sometimes then we're wanting to put so much time to those extra screen timing of things, which can be beneficial to some, then kind of mixed, like maybe not so beneficial in some, but just our minds of being occupied just jump in many directions now at this point. But yeah, I love Rain Man, and it is just one of those films. And now, if we were to talk about a worst example, man, we jumped back and forth.
Oh,
I know.
Yeah, should we get into that movie?
Are you ready to get into it, or do we need or should we think about a few things? Because I know The Ringer, that's gonna have us both going down thinking.
I so hated that I had to watch that.
Yes,
last night.
and I'm I don't blame you, my friend. I really don't. I mean, honestly, like the fun aspects, though, there is no fun aspects. Maybe for laughs and giggles at the time, but even then, even though it was year 2005, still much about autism was being kind of researched so much. And I volunteered for Special Olympics, and then then that's the thing with why I feel insulted in a way after watching that so many times at a young age on HBO, not knowing autism but being on the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing is with that movie is they actually cast people who actually are disabled, and when you watch it, you're just kind of like the friendship that I'll establish the story and then wrap it to these characters for this
for
comment
sure
to make sense. But The Ringer is a movie about a guy who owes someone a lot of money. He's in trouble, and the way he figures out how he can make that money, or I should say his
uncle
helps him make the money.
The quote he tells him, kind of thing. This quote I just still cannot get out of my head, saying, "I found a way to make the money. We are gonna fix the Special." It's like I'm thinking in my head, fix the Special Olympics. There is no fixing.
Yeah, no, there isn't. And yeah, so they realized to make money, they're gonna fix the Special Olympics by having Johnny Knoxville go in and basically try to compete on his own against people who are handicapped. And they get a little far, but still.
And the one thing that I think is just unfair and stereotypical about this film is like the fact that, okay, you have someone on the spectrum that you give so much in that film commercialism to. Kind of, I'm thinking, okay, but you don't do that for everyone else in the spectrum at Special Olympics. And I know in today's society, they would never do that.
Yeah.
Like how there was.
Oh, watch out. You gotta make sure we hear you.
Like, you know how you have that one character, Jimmy, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they're giving him, like, all the attention like that. And I'm thinking, okay, in real Special Olympics, they would not do that. That sends a wrong message.
Yeah, so what I want to know, because as someone who actually volunteered in the Special Olympics, and I was actually thinking myself I should volunteer sometime. What did they do where you're like, that would never happen? Was it the whole thing with Jimmy, and he was like the guy who was the guy everyone was competing against?
Jimmy, and
Jimmy.
The fact that they gave that character commercialism and did it all around everyone else who deserves as much attention. That is the part of that movie I find offensive. Like, okay, so you're giving one person on the spectrum the most commercial. How does that make everyone else feel?
Yeah,
you know, like going forward. But at the same time, my defense of Johnny Knoxville's character, even though he knows what he's doing is wrong, he knows it's wrong too. But at the same time, he inspires those others on the spectrum. So my only respect for that movie is the fact that he becomes friends with them and truly defends them.
Yeah, and he really doesn't become friends in a way. Like, yeah, he does become friends with them because he's just sort of he's living with them while he does this event. But yeah, when he gets to the point where he's telling everybody, oh no, he's my friend. He's it's like, wait, how is he your friend? All these guys did was tell him that he was a faker, which he was, exposed him for what he was doing, and then I think what they ended up doing was they wanted him to compete against Jimmy, who was the
exactly because and that's the thing I've realized. They realize they're jealous of how the character Jimmy gets all the attention while the rest of them are kind of treated like a burden, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think they thought at the time, maybe, Johnny Knoxville's character, that's just how he was going to become, but maybe he's faking to get that attention. And it's like, okay, yes, he's faking, but it's not for, like, to get attention, honestly.
Yeah, no, he was doing it to get money.
Yes.
And, I don't know, in the end, I don't know if he got the money or not, but, okay, here's...
The uncle is a bad influence in that film. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. Yeah, he's a piece of shit.
Oh, yes, but there's a scene, and I don't care if it's spoiled, but where Johnny Knoxville goes to confession, and when he tells the pastor, "I've been pretending to be mentally challenged so I can fix my," as soon as that pastor punches him through the walls, I'm thinking,
that was the only part that I thought was funny.
Well, I did too, because I'm just thinking, oh, that is a big slap in the face, because you are just like scarring yourself.
You just got denied by God. I mean, Jesus Christ.
And he even tells them there's no sin that's unforgivable to pass through the realms of sacred redemption. It's like, well, okay, now the wheels have turned right there.
And then the priest ends up actually betting on Johnny Knoxville.
I think the priest started to realize kind of later on what that cause actually was.
Right.
But in the end, though, The Ringer is just such a wrong movie. And even like a lot of times where when I was younger watching it, then wanting to laugh at some of the moments where the ones on the spectrum get upset or mad at John, I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to laugh that they're actually handicapped. Right. I'm not going to laugh.
And they use the R word a lot in that movie where it's almost insulting. They don't even use a full R word. At some point, they call them tards.
Oh, yeah. And then at the same time, one thing I have realized that is a little accurate, but still wrong how they do it with that film is like let's say a character in that film wants to swear or say a name, they don't even say the full word like you just said. They'll just spell it out because I think they still have a sensitive mindset where they're thinking, what happens if I actually say it?
Yeah, well, this movie isn't very sensitive to its subjects.
It is not.
Because at one point I thought they were gonna do a Full Metal Jacket where Johnny Knoxville is asleep in the bed and they just take like the soap bars, wrap him around a blanket and hit him with it.
But honestly, come to think about that, sadly, like with someone being on the spectrum, if I were to think about that today, kind of thing, those who are like in that film, even if they were doing, they would not have like the meanness. Well, some probably would, but many would not.
Yeah, it seems like now. Do they actually sleep together and have like little bunk beds and all that?
They do. Yeah. They all become buddy. There's even a moment where he convinces them to go to take them to a late night movie and break the rules, and it's just like, well, why can't we break the rules? You're breaking the rules. Like, we've been letting you break it for nothing.
Okay, and here's the part of the movie that really kind of got me upset is, so Katherine Heigl, who plays Lynn, she finds out that Johnny Knoxville is a faker, which, as you said, that was a main scene where they're all getting their medals, and then Johnny Knoxville says, I can't take this bronze medal. I need to tell you guys the truth, which, where did that come from? Like,
I think it was just more that and that's the one scene of that movie where there's kind of the positive message, because here's why. Because even though, okay, he made what he wanted out of it, but then there was still unfairness all around. Because look, you know, even the one everyone hated started to lack and didn't end up winning at the end, kind of thing. So I think what ultimately it comes down to is like it doesn't matter. Everyone's on the spectrum, but Johnny in that his character he plays is like the only one where it's like he just thinks, I truly did not have to thrive. I just had to fake, but it's just like I feel terribly guilty about it.
I guess he feels guilty because he has to for the movie so he doesn't seem immoral. But yeah, I mean, like at one point they're all friends and he's like teaching them how to do like a stage play. And
and the scenes where they just train him, those are my favorite scenes of that movie. Actually, 'cause even though most of this movie, I have a resentment with the scenes where it's like where they're training him to be the better athlete. I just love that for this concept. It's the fact that it's like, everyone on this, it's like people who are in Special Olympics, but they're doing like what they probably don't get to do most of their life, which is like have such like a big social thing going, kind of thing, you know. And Johnny Knoxville's character is like their guide to that, truly.
Yeah. Well, it's totally unearned when all of a sudden he's their friend, because it's like he was manipulating these people. He really should have just been kicked off, but he wasn't. Although, like, I guess he didn't tell him until the end. But okay, here's the thing. He's doing a play with these guys, right? Like, they're all friends. They're all buddies.
Oh, yes.
Katherine Heigl comes in. Lynn comes in. And she just immediately not only forgives Johnny Knoxville for rigging the Special Olympics, but she ends up giving him a big kiss, too, and falls in love with him. And I'm like, how the fuck did she all of a sudden fall in love with Steve,
right?
who was playing... And his fake autistic character's name was Jeffrey Dahmer, or Jeffy Dahmer.
Oh, God. And then what they would have to say, which is other wrong about this movie, is because you have younger people who are going to watch it and they're like, who's Jeffy Dahmer? You know?
Oh,
Then they always had to, then here's what they say in that movie instead. They're like, oh, it's Jeffy Dahmer. Oh, with an O. Like.
Yeah, exactly. With Jeffrey Dahmer.
Like, that is wrong.
Like, I didn't even know it was spelled with an O. I didn't.
Me neither. And I didn't even know that full thing till way later in life. And having people in my family who kind of lived through that era, I remember asking them, like in that movie, who is this kind of thing? And they're like, okay, is this a subject, given my age at the time, like, is this a subject we're going to talk about right now? Like, maybe later.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about the serial killer.
Yeah, exactly.
Who eats his victims.
Yes, but I mean the fact that I'm just thinking in that film, all the names he had to choose, kind of thing, is just, but the thing, though, that's also kind of morally wrong about this movie, when his uncle is teaching him how to act special. And ironically, we're just talking about Rain Man. Here's the 4 films they watched.
Yep, Rain Man, Forrest Gump,
The Best of Chevy Chase, I Am Sam.
Oh, God, I forgot that I Am Sam in there.
And then But then I just love, where it's like his uncle's telling him, commit. Okay, you should add this. I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, well, I mean, just the idea. How the hell did this movie even make it to Hollywood? How did people go? You're gonna do?
I think many.
I think it was because they had the people who actually, were mentally disabled to be in it, and they're like, well, we have them, so we can make it.
And more after Johnny Knoxville, of Jackass and whatnot, I think they're like, oh, this can be fun, even though it's kind of wrong, but it's Johnny Knoxville, we're gonna have a fun time.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's Johnny Knoxville. I mean, they kind of do a whole Jackass thing itself, where when they're training him. They're not even training him. They're just punching him in the stomach.
Oh, that is my
repeatedly.
favorite because I'm thinking in my head, okay, they're doing that because technically they hate him, even though that's not true, kind of thing.
Right.
Because I'm thinking it's well deserved in that moment.
Well, yeah, because they're kind of punishing him for doing this, but they're letting him do it still. So they're like, okay, you can still do this, but that doesn't mean we're not going to basically put you through, pun intended, the ringer.
And then the conversations he has with his uncle. His uncle's not happy with him, how he's doing as like this Olympic athlete. He's just thinking like the fact that he tells him this, and there is some truth to this in this scene where he's like, how can someone like that guy be beating you? Ain't natural. Then Johnny Knoxville's like, well, these guys are great. Many of them could probably even be in a regular Olympics. And here's what his uncle's like, maybe on the French team, whatever. Then Johnny
maybe on the French team.
Then Johnny Knoxville's like, well, there's a guy who ran a marathon 2 hours and 45 minutes. His uncle says, oh, that's just propaganda. One of us got
right.
thinking, no, that is not propaganda.
Right.
That's
his
record.
Character. He just doesn't like people.
And I mean, I looked up honestly after that how long, like what the record time to run a marathon is even in Chicago. It is, but even a record is still like 3 hours or even almost at the 4 hour mark. Honestly,
wow.
So it's like many of that film is just like just. Like to an extent, I think his uncle, like we said, just the asshole uncle. But The Ringer is just like it's mispresented. It is misleading. Has some of its laughing, cherishing moments, but in the end, though, it is just morally wrong. Even in the moments where it's like everyone having a fun time, I still feel they make fun of those on the spectrum, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think was like the most inaccurate thing in that movie that got you going? What are they doing?
The most inaccurate thing in that movie, I just felt was honestly, like it's that scene where basically, like where they all kind of like pummel on him and go crazy, be like you're a faker, yada 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 kind of thing. And I understand they get upset, but in most cases, like many on the spectrum would not have it truly in them to gang up like that,
right?
I think, and that's kind of what I just found offensive because it's like, okay, they want to be bullies now, it's just wrong. It's like it felt like labeling them, like they want to do something bad. But you'd be amazed though, many on the spectrum, like me at times, yes, we'll get annoyed or aggravated at stuff, but we think otherwise. We're so much like I feel so much more sensitive to those things,
right?
Kind of thing. Maybe it's like when you're upset with someone, be angry at them, but wouldn't just be vindictive all of a sudden,
Yeah. I mean, it's
the representation of them being vindictive. I felt was just
that was wrong.
Wrong, and then the moment where I could probably ramble on a lot of things about what is wrong with this movie and many aspects.
Go for it. This is the place. This is
but
the
then
place.
Even when you have Jimmy talking about sponsorship, I'm thinking, okay, still you're giving him sponsorship, like a scene where like talk about quotes he's gonna say, saying I'm going to Disney World, and it's like, come on, Michael Jordan. I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna give like while everyone else is not treated that way, you're still giving someone who's like the same as. Still similar to everyone else who's in Special Olympics, like all that extra attention like that. Yeah. There's not even commercialism like that in Special Olympics.
Well, the fact that you can tell this movie's tone deaf and is not in the right lane when you cast Johnny Knoxville as you're gonna cast the guy from Jackass, probably because he was the only actor who would agree to do it. I feel like.
And what they've said with the last Jackass, I love what they say, but I'm just thinking, when does it happen? Because they would say, oh, concussion, as long as you have him before you're 50, okay, and Johnny Knoxville's 49, so you're good. I'm thinking, okay, he's probably going to still be taking bigger risks with his head, like he did as the Ringer kind of thing, as he did with Jackass.
Well, he's not an actor,
Exactly. He likes doing stunts for a lot of times.
Yeah, he's like Tom Cruise if Tom Cruise just hurt himself all the time.
But yeah, even the show Jackass in of itself didn't last long kind of thing. And the Ringer didn't even, I don't think it did very well at the box office.
I doubt it. It was funny. When that movie came out, I worked in a Blockbuster video. And in the Blockbuster, they would have like a tape playing of like all the movies that are just newly released, and they'd play the trailer. And I just remember they played the trailer again and again and again and again and again all day for like 8 hours.
I remember when we watched that movie, it was still when Netflix being delivered to like to the houses were a thing. You didn't have streaming or anything yet. Then I remember, I'm like, oh, I've seen the trailers for The Ringer, but of course didn't really have the smartphone technology to keep doing research on the movies. You had to sit on the computer or whatnot. So we would just randomly add movies to the list. I added that one, and when I was watching that, like I would start to laugh, and then people are like, that's actually not really funny. But I was 12. What could you do?
Right, exactly.
Because then some would be like, how do you feel if that was you, Tarek? Because technically you are kind of on the spectrum in a way,
Now, how do movies usually get the spectrum wrong? Because I feel like you see movies and they don't get them, like they don't know really what they're doing,
They get, honestly, there are ways where it's like they get the spectrum like kind of accurate and then they get it very wrong. But like, I think, here's where you get the spectrum really wrong even. Like, let's say, like I feel like, like they need to disregard sometimes. Like, let's say, even though we'll try to stick to these two films, like let's say you make a horror film, like The Omen or something like that, then you act like someone who is on the spectrum is why they're having their disorders. But it's like, okay, there's kind of much more to that, because in a way it's like what I mean by much more is is usually like someone either has a mindset where it's like, where it's like they were kind of come from a lifestyle where they were always abused and something like that. So they kind of get that wrong a lot. Kind of like sometimes there are some on the spectrum who have been abused, and there are some who have not. There's always had a hard time. But I think it's more about like the movies always make it seem like many's upbringing is why they really struggle in today's world. So that's where they get it wrong. They always, in many films, they make it look like their upbringing was so negative kind of thing, which is why their symptoms are worse than they are. But that is that's very inaccurate in today's world.
Like your upbringing would affect how you behave, but also it's not solely the issue with the autism.
Exactly.
As I can understand, yeah. But what do you think Hollywood's gotten better with that, or are they?
I feel like they have. I feel like they have on some areas, and they have not in some areas. But in terms of, I feel like they've kind of gotten the bigger picture, a little more of the idea of the spectrum, even though they kind of sometimes present it the wrong way. Like, I feel like, they have an idea of where it's like, let's incorporate the stronger suits a little more kind of thing. Let's incorporate where the talent truly lies. Let's incorporate the bright side of what comes of someone on the spectrum in a movie. But then whereas back then it was kind of like just jump in kind of thing to all the sadness aspects of that element for sure.
Yeah. I mean, are there any movies dealing with autism? Isn't Champions sort of about that?
Yes, and we're going to be, we'll be watching that soon, actually. That's a true story as well.
No kidding.
And I'm thinking, even though we're just talking about I'm thinking something that's based on a true story. And honestly, like even with someone like Woody Harrelson, I think he can be like looking back, like looking at that, even though we'll watch it next week. Like we'll have them. I think someone like that is someone who could have the coach vibe. But I think, what's important is like if you want to do something based on the spectrum nowadays, or what Hollywood should do, make sure what they're doing is honestly based off of true events to get a full picture of things instead of trying to make something completely up. Because like how we were talking about all these films, which we should talk about.
Yeah.
We haven't had a hard time finding the ones based on real events so much kind of thing.
Right. You mean The Ringer's not based on a real event? No.
Well, the concept of Special Olympics will have what they would do in Special Olympics.
Has anyone really tried that ever, to pretend that they had a disability? And
No. I mean, maybe... Or it's more like, because like when I was going to school, like what I know a lot of people do now kind of thing, like sometimes I even argue a little bit, like the accommodations I had growing up kind of thing. I argue how it was. I'm thinking, okay, how would this have benefited me later? Like let's say I take an exam, then they give me a modified exam kind of thing. I'm thinking, okay, how does that help me later? Because in college, exams aren't going to be modified kind of thing. And then some don't get them modified. But I think, even like in many instances, like a lot of times, like with schooling and stuff like that kind of thing, like you would have some where it's like people's parents can assume that they're similar. Usually they have to go through like a system where it's like an all-day type of study a lot of times, or they have to see doctors. Well, now I have done much of that most of my life before technology evolved, but then ultimately, like with how much has changed with our world, it's obvious. I feel like you don't even realize someone on a spectrum, like who's high functioning, even some who's probably not high functioning, they truly sometimes don't realize what works for them till probably they get to age 25 or so, when their brain's more developed, when there's a point in their life where they've had to fulfill a big responsibility, find the right pattern. Because you could jump back and forth having your different patterns, like how I jumped back and forth working in movie theaters, how I've had to work different full-time jobs. And I feel like we live in a world now where many on the spectrum, even in and of itself, have to be ready to accept more challenges, especially.
Yeah. When it comes to movies about the spectrum, circling back to that, which ones depict the challenge of living with autism and evolving with it the best? Is there any outside of Rain Man that you could mention?
Adam with
Adam.
Hugh Dancy. He's someone I love Adam because I feel like I'm Adam in a way with my movie sense. Because Adam is someone where it's like, you know, he has such a fascination with space, eats the same kind of food. He feels like he's falling in love with someone, but then he's so sensitive to even follow up with her, kind of thing. And then when it gets to a point where he's finally, like when he realizes, there's a moment where he gets so upset when he realizes that the girl he was in love with, like when they like had to lie to him when they met her parents, acting like, oh, they just ran into him. No, they didn't. Like I think like that's the thing, you know. But then he realizes later on, it wasn't to hurt him. She was just worried. I think that was gonna make him, you know, very mentally overwhelmed. But then that upset him, because I think it truly shows how, honestly, you know, how many sometimes, like I've even gotten offended. Like even if I find out about something last minute, it really kind of shows how some feel hurt by how some people do what they can to work around them, you know. And there's even a moment where Adam is told, kind of thing, or even the girl that Adam's in love with is told that Adam lives in another world, but then she's like, well, I accept him for it. And she's like, because he has a good heart, he just doesn't understand. And Adam's disability was he said he had Asperger's syndrome, and I could just see that. But where I find touching about that movie so much, though, is when he's having conversation about space so much, because he loves space, anything new he finds out. And then his coworkers like not this subject, Adam. Lunch is for guy talk. And he's like, a woman moved into 3A. Then his co's like, okay, now that's lunch talk. Tell me more.
Right. Well, what's Adam about, in case someone doesn't?
Adam
like
is
me.
about an individual who has Asperger's syndrome. His father just died. He takes over the apartment. He's someone who's in his pattern always of eating mac and cheese every day, being absorbed by his fascination of space, loses his job working in office, but then has to find a new job. But then he meets a girl who moved down the street from him. And now Hugh Dancy plays Adam, and then the one who plays the girl, I'll look back at that in a moment, was but even going forward, the thing that goes forward with all that is just alone with it. There's a moment where he realizes, you know, this girl truly cares about him. So he wants, like, a lot of times she goes like above and beyond to help him, which I think is where his sensitivity comes in. Because what I mean by sensitivity is, like, let's say they go in a restaurant. Instead, she's like, oh, can we take it to go? I'm sure he's getting overwhelmed. And then when he has a job interview, he wants to practice everything to the core, like have her dress up, have her ask the type of question, because he really wants to nail a job interview. So that's like where I kind of notice, and that's little me with stuff where it's like really wanting something or stressed. What if something doesn't go well? Like, you want to make sure, like, because he knows he can get distracted, but at the same time he wants to succeed. But then and then the hard thing about a movie like Adam, though, is, you know, and I've even had this, when many on the spectrum realize people make certain sacrifices for them later on, or have had to be dishonest just because they're worried they'd get upset. I understand why that honestly hurts them, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, everyone is just different, and it's like, and it just, you know, it just being like, it makes it, that just makes Adam realize that his life is a lie in a way. No, it feels like his life is a lie, kind of thing.
It's a hard thing to realize when if you do get autism. It's like, oh, now I know I have these limits.
Yeah, and the girl in that film was played by Rose Byrne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that was a good film, and I just love how he is just so fascinated. He's not just fascinated by space. He's fascinated with like the many wonders he can make out of New York, like in the gardens he can walk through, in the forest that he walks through, kind of thing. And he tries to share that with her, but at the same time, though, kind of thing, he has to understand that not everything can unfortunately work in the favor he hopes for, and that he has to learn to accept like the disappointing factors of what life is.
Yes, he has to cope with life like all of us do.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if he lost his job and has to find another one. That's got to be difficult.
Oh
for
yeah,
him.
it is. But he does pull through. But I just love Adam for that concept. Like, it's someone who wants what's best for him, but at the same time he's so sensitive to those around him, truly.
When did this movie come out?
It came out, I'm going to look it up. I mean, I remember it had a limited release. I wish it would have gotten more of the attention that it would have gotten, but unfortunately it didn't. But it is just,
I see.
But Adam, the film, came out in...
Well, before we even
we
get to that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Rain Man, I have to say, I thought I was going to watch it, and I thought I was going to be kind of triggered by it to see what it got right and what it got wrong. But that one, really, like, there's people with autism who function like that. Do you think someone like Raymond would be able to thrive on his own if given the proper treatment? I mean, he could be an accountant, you know?
I mean, maybe not. I mean, many technologies have evolved that can really help people, but at the same time, there's always going to be an area or something that can be forgetful and then still kind of pose a risk.
Right.
Unfortunately. Like, everything would have to be automated, not automated, but timed at their recording. But then if it goes wrong, the question is, would they know how to think fast to fix it, unfortunately.
Right. Do you think Hollywood does a good job depicting autism now, or are they still kind of...
They're getting better, but I don't think they do 100%.
Right. Yeah. It's just one of those things that people have trouble understanding. Like, when it comes to you and autism, what's like the main thing people have trouble getting that perhaps a movie got but a person didn't?
You mean like about me or about in general?
Yeah, just like in general about you, about autism.
I think a lot will kind of think kind of like if I'm like let's say, you know, like I'm very quiet one day or something like that, or if I look like I'm not in the greatest mood, it's nothing with them. They'll assume like they did something wrong immediately, but then I'm just like, no, that's just me. I'm just in my mindset where it's like just want to be silent, just need my space kind of thing.
Yeah, same here. I sometimes do that. Sometimes I need that in large large crowded settings too. But I mean, I'm glad we picked these two movies.
I am too, my friend. I mean, this is just...
There's a lot to talk about with them because it's hard to get into something I don't know quite as well. I think in Rain Man, they said he's an idiot savant, high-functioning form, you know?
Yeah, and what they mean by high functioning is like the memory of that kind of thing, truly. And the thing that I just love in that film is like how, you know, how he would always say, oh, Judge, this is on this time, and then here's what Tom Cruise does to help take over that. I'm like thinking, wow, that was our mode of technology. He bought him one of those like handheld TVs.
Oh,
and then
yes,
I think
now
we
if he had
them.
an iPhone, he would be fine.
Oh yeah, back then even those handheld TVs, they didn't really last very long, I don't think.
No, they were crap.
Yeah, I mean, because reception, we didn't have cable or satellite or stuff like that very much back then. It was just like, but yeah, that's the thing, the moments of the times. But my only argument, even in the movies and in how depicting technology as an assistant, like the problem is, even in today's world, we can't, like, even those on the spectrum have to understand there's going to be times where they can't rely on technology to help them 100%, which is the hard thing nowadays.
You got to rely on yourself.
Especially with COVID, where many, even on the spectrum, who really struggled had to be from home.
Right.
And they were so used to their guidance in person. Like, that was just, it was a big struggle for them because they probably don't do those routines very often of having to be at home like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think I've said everything I could about this.
As did I. We could go for hours. Like you make me now think of that show on Netflix I really like, Atypical, just because each episode is just different with one having autism, like different like different fascinations, how his day's going, different boundaries. But then the thing I love is how, like in that, is like how there are some times where his boundaries go a little too far, like as in how he reacts when he's angry, or how he needs to block things out. Like he does it in ways where it's like, okay, that may not be okay.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Right. He has blow-ups in public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like say be like this is me a little bit in a way. Like this is probably the most thing. Like let's say I think this was me during COVID, my friend. I was just like when everything was constant, I'm just like, the world is done forever. I'm never gonna have movie experiences.
Catastrophizing is a big part of the spectrum, I believe.
Oh yeah, but then I kind of knew in a sense by late 2021 we would be at, and I was right, because when you like look at timelines, it was starting to make more sense. It was just weird how it happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was hard living in a world that was like unreal at the same time, having things on the outside that help us cope, like movies. And yes, we could have movies from home, but I love the big screen. And then you had nothing new. It wasn't special anymore.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, COVID, for me, like, I know this isn't about movies, but
Yes.
I mean, I will wrap it back to film in a way.
Oh yeah.
COVID for me, I remember at first it was horrible. I catastrophized like crazy.
Oh, I did too.
I think one thing about COVID is it scared me so shitless that I ended up losing like 65 pounds, because I was like, well, if I'm heavy and I get COVID, I'm done for. And it was, honestly, it was kind of like it was like a great time for me to reflect on myself.
I felt, and I see where you're coming from. Like, I come to realize, like, even when we were in stage 5 finally, I came to patterns where I'm like, you know what? Even though it kind of sucked, to an extent, I kind of missed the extra downtime, because there were times where it's like not being in a routine, where it's like, okay, some things are now open. This isn't so bad. Yes, I still have to mask up, but like it's like a routine. But then when reality happened after, because I think we're still in this pattern, many businesses are still dealing with the aftermath. Returning to everything after like a year and a half was honestly hard, even for someone on the spectrum like myself, because it's like the pattern is like had to be changed still going forward.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was for me. It was just like freedom in a way.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I get to walk all day. I get to take care of myself, and then I get to go home and work on some movie thing.
Then it
gave me a lot of time to see movies.
And the best, my best thing out of that, I'm just thinking, well, we have to social distance. You know, when they brought drive-ins back, I'm just like, hell yes. Like, I'm like, the creativity we got out of this thing.
I wanted to do a drive-in film festival.
Oh, I'll also do a drive-in film fest if we ever could.
I think that would be amazing. But I mean, when we talk about these movies, it's amazing the difference between Rain Man and The Ringer in terms of. I would just say The Ringer had some of the worst editing I've seen in a movie in a long time. Like, there's one scene where it just like fades down, and then there's some lazy title that says like 6 weeks later or something like that.
Yes.
And it fades up, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, who did they just like hire some kid to edit this?
That was the thing, I think, because it's like when you look at it, it's almost like you're watching something on Comedy Central, and they have played it on Comedy Central a number of times.
Oh God, so that's where it was.
And honestly, well, they were kind of the big part of it, but I mean, at the same time, though, it's just so honestly, so just morally wrong, and it's not even a good movie.
No, it's not. It's lazy and boring and by the numbers, and you know. But I mean, the biggest insult is they actually got people who were in the Special Olympics to depict themselves, and this wasn't the best movie for them to depict themselves in. Like the guy from Jackass is pretending to be handicapped.
That's my better word for it. My better terminology for it. Let's just call it Jackass joined Special Olympics. Honestly.
There you go.
Instead
Special
of the
Olympics
Ringer.
Jackass edition.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, but when it comes to Rain Man, you know, Dustin Hoffman really convinced he's committed to that role, very much so. You know, where it's kind of he became sort of a meme before memes existed. Where people like, yeah, I'm a great driver, yeah.
Oh, I'm an excellent driver. Be like, oh, I'll let you drive. Oh, okay. Then he puts his arm across, like, no, you never touch the steering.
Yeah, like, he doesn't understand how things work.
Or then how he has things where he has to buy stuff from a certain store all the time. And then
Yeah.
his brother's like, well, you buy it whatever store we go to. It's not this specific
Yeah.
one.
He wanted to go to Kmart, and then he learned that Kmart sucks.
It actually does suck still.
Yeah. Is it still around?
Some locations, but I'm sorry. If I go to Kmart, I'll go there if I'm desperate. But Kmart does suck.
Yeah, it does.
I agree.
I think I've been there like once as a kid, and that was about it. And God, I can't believe how much well, this is I'll change this for later subject, but it's like when you get older, you can't believe how much things change.
I agree.
You know,
and even
stay the same at the same time.
and it's still changing. Like even before here, like I was looking at, like this was yesterday. I was looking at parts of Chicago that used to be ones I loved as a kid. Just in case to turn this over. One place I really loved. Apparently it went under, but I'm not surprised. It was Rainforest Cafe. Like, I know now. I understand why I loved Rainforest Cafe as a kid, because I thought to myself I would never see real animals like that.
Yeah,
and even though they were not real, it felt real.
It's more for the novelty than it is for the food there.
Yes, and it got too expensive.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, the nice thing about COVID was I got to see so many movies, and there's so many more. It's almost overwhelming how many movies there are.
HBO was really my jam during COVID. I remember I binge watched all The Wire. That's what really got me hooked on Succession. That got me hooked on Mindhunter. It was like TV series after TV series, and I was like movies too. But I found myself so much in frustration of how all these movies you were supposed to have, and I even remember 007 being the very push that decided to change it up. And I'm thinking, oh, this is still just a big thing in Europe. We're fine.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So wrapping it back up around movies, because we kind of went off on a tangent.
We did, but you know us, we can go all day about this.
Oh
stuff.
yeah, I could go all day, but no, I did like the sensitivity that Rain Man presented. You don't just see someone who had a disability; you saw someone who's very capable and has extraordinary gifts that he can contribute to society. And like you said, it's about loving yourself for who you are. And that's what was great. And The Ringer tried to have that message about love yourself for who you are and you're special in your own way, but it did it very haphazardly and foolishly. And
I totally agree.
And that's kind of the big difference between these movies. Rain Man, I think, did his research on the subject, while the other one did research, but they didn't really do it. They just cast a bunch of people who were in the Special Olympics as like a card where they could say, no, we can make this movie because they agreed.
Oh yes, I totally agree. But I will say though, Mike, this was honestly one of the most insightful talks about the spectrum, most rewarding talks to get to do.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I agree with you totally on everything. Like, I do agree that Hollywood needs to really improve the spectrum. At the same time, they're getting better, but there's so much more they can tie into what they do.
They could cast people who are on it,
Yeah, they can, but make it more rewarding, honestly. Yeah, come on, Marvel, come on, DC. give these guys a chance, honestly.
Right. I mean, I don't know what role they could be in, but you could certainly put them in one,
Oh yes, and I know a few years ago someone who was the world's strongest man was autistic, honestly, and I love that, because that person obviously shows they committed to their craft so much, and they didn't want the world to stop them what they could accomplish.
Right, exactly. But I think, having said all that, thank you, Tarek, so much for coming on. Mike. You can check out Tarek's stuff at
Movies with Tarek.
movieswithtarek.com. You can check out my stuff at ypareviews.com. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree, and you'll hopefully agree with us on Rain Man and The Ringer.
Yes, for sure. And definitely and we're part of Chicago Indie Critics, and we'll have more reviews coming to you soon.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Yes, and please be sensitive and kind and love each other.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.